Greetings everyone, and welcome back to another computer-related tech review. In today's one, I'm going to be taking a look at another mini PC, which I've done my review on the Beelink SER6 MAX. I'll card that at the top right if you want to take a look at that first. But otherwise, this is a mini PC that is powered by an Intel i9 processor and is made by the company GEEKOM. And I have heard of GEEKOM before, I think specifically for their mini PCs, but they reached out to me and offered me their latest mini PC with an i9 processor in it, and knowing that I was getting the Beelink SER6 MAX with a Ryzen processor in it, I thought it would be good to try and compare the two to see how AMD and Intel are doing in today's market, because I'm really not up to date with the latest from AMD and Intel, so this is going to be a bit of an experience for me. Now, I'm going to be going into this review with a mindset of mainly a consumer. I'm going to be talking quite technical throughout this review, of course, but I'm also going to try and look at this as I've just purchased it and I'm taking a look at it, and all opinions in this video are going to be my own, and I haven't been paid by GEEKOM to look at this PC. They've just sent this out to me for review, and that's what I'm going to do. So a massive thank you to GEEKOM for sending this mini PC out to me for review. I really do appreciate it, and I hope I can deliver an honest and in-depth review of this product. And since with computer related stuff, there's only so much I can do with testing and all that sort of stuff, I'll do my best to showcase the main features that people are going to want to mainly focus on. If this mini PC is your kind of thing and you might be interested in purchasing it, there's two links in the description below, but they're not affiliate links or anything like that. I won't get paid for any clicks or any purchases or anything like that. They're just there for your convenience. GEEKOM have also set up a $40 coupon code for you to use if you want to purchase this, and you can use coupon code SMOOREZ on GEEKOM's website to get $40 off, or SMOOREZ1 on Amazon's website to get $40 off. Hey, any saving is better than none, I guess. And I know what I just said right there really feels like a sponsored bit, but I'm not being paid for this review. I'm not being influenced by GEEKOM or anything like that. I'm just letting you know that there's coupon codes, so if you want to save some money, you can. And before I get into the pricing and the listing, the usual timestamps are in the description, as well as the pinned comment for you to skip along past certain segments of this video. I know this one's not going to be for everybody because it's a mini PC. It's not a welcome device or anything like that, so I'm going to be a bit more serious in this one, but feel free to use those timestamps if you want to skip along. So currently, at the moment, the GEEKOM Mini IT13 Mini PC with a 13th gen i9 processor, 32 gigs of RAM, and a 2TB SSD is currently $789 from GEEKOM's official website, which comes to about $1,240 Australian. Usually I'd show a currency conversion chart, but because it's such a pricey item, I've only converted it to Australian just to give you an idea of how much it would cost if I was to purchase it from here. It's free shipping from GEEKOM's website, and I'd say the same thing goes with Amazon, but the i9 32 gig RAM and 2TB SSD option is the maxed out specs you can get with this. For people who want a mini PC, I'm pretty sure they're not going to want a high-end i9 chip inside of it. An i7 is a lot cheaper, coming in at $689, and then if you use the coupon code, you get it even cheaper. So that is an option, but it also comes with a 1TB SSD. But if you don't want to go with an i7 and you want to go with an i5, you're looking at $499 for 16 gigs of RAM and a 512 gig SSD, which for $500, that's not a bad deal. Now, I've just looked on Cinebench's website to see if I can find anything around the same price range, and I've actually found the Asus PN51, which has a Ryzen 7 in it, 64 gigs of RAM, and a 4TB SSD for $1,200 Australian. So I don't have to wait for shipping or anything like that. I can literally go to a store and pick that up for the same price as this. Granted, I'm not getting an i9 processor, but I'm not too sure how extreme an i9 processor is compared to the Ryzen 7 processor in this. But otherwise, there are some i7 options available for around the same price range. So I think price-wise at the moment, the i9 probably wouldn't be ideal for me anyways. I'd probably say the i7 or the i5 would be a better option, because realistically, I think the i9 is overkill for a mini PC anyways, especially with it having only integrated graphics as well. Which, speaking of the i5, i7, and i9, here is the specifications on screen for the GEEKOM IT13 Mini PC. So the i9 that I've got in this is the 13th gen i9 13900H with 14 cores, 20 threads, 24 meg cache, up to 5.4 GHz turbo. And then you've got the i7 variant, which is the i7 13700H with 14 cores and 20 threads as well, 24 meg cache, up to 5 GHz, and from what I see between the i7 and i9, there's not too much of a difference there. So if you want to get the i7 variant and also a 1TB SSD, it's $100 less. So I guess it's up to you at the end of the day what you really want to go with. But the i5 13500H is 12 cores, 16 threads, 24 meg cache, up to 4.7 GHz. The TDP is 45 watts. All of these processors belong to the Raptor Lake H series, which is a pretty cool name, I'm not going to lie, and they're based on a 10 nanometer manufacturing process. Graphics wise, we've got Intel Iris Xe graphics graphics compatible, and I haven't really had much luck with them, but we'll see how we go in this review. RAM, we've got dual channel DDR4 3200, which supports up to 64 gig. I thought this would have had DDR5, which has a much higher clock speed, but I guess DDR4 will do. We also have one M.2 2280 PCIe Gen 4 4x SSD, which with the i9 config, you get a 2TB SSD. And you also have a slot for another 2TB M.2 2242 SSD as well. But you also have the option to install a 2.5-inch SATA hard drive that has a height of 7mm, and that's expandable up to 2TB as well. So you have quite a few options for storage in this. Ports wise, we have 3 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, a USB 2 port, 2 USB 4 ports, an SD card reader, 1 headphone jack, a 2.5 gigabit LAN port, 2 HDMI 2.0 ports. Operating system, we've got Windows 11 Pro on this, which I'm not too fond of Windows 11, but it is what it is on this. Bluetooth 5.2, Intel Wi-Fi 6, power adapter is 19 volts at 6.32 amps, and what's in the box is the PC, the VESA mount, power adapter, HDMI cable, user manual, and a thank you card. Now just quickly, I want to go over some of the advertising for the IT13 PC. So we do have a benchmark score just here, with the i9 being used here, and from the scores there, I'm going to try Cinebench myself and see what it comes up as, if it's going to be the same scores as this, or it's going to be slightly different. We'll have to see when we try it. Here's a cool picture of the cooling as well. Thankful all-new GeekCool cooling technology delivers quite yet efficient cooling. GEEKOM Mini IT13 is capable of running stably for 24/7 in environments ranging from minus 20 degrees Celsius to 55 degrees Celsius. Once I start testing this PC, I'll let you know the fan noise as well as the heat that's generated from the i9 processor. Now the Mini PC does support 8K and quad displays, so if you want to hook up 4 displays to this thing, you absolutely can, with the 2 HDMI ports and the 2 USB 4 ports. Alright, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to take a look at within the advertising. I've went over the specifications, but it's a lot easier if I show you this PC, and like I'll be doing with the Beelink PC, I'll be tearing this down first before I start testing it, so I get an idea of how easy it is to disassemble and upgrade and all that sort of stuff. Taking 5 days from China to Australia, I have a box. So I'll crack this open, and I also think that I've got a US lead in this because they don't offer an Australian lead, but luckily you can replace that lead with a standard laptop power cable, which is not that much of an issue, I guess, but for someone living in Australia that wants to purchase one of these, you're not going to get an Australian plug, so you'll have to go out and find one. Inside the box, we have the Mini PC. Well, here it is. GEEKOM Mini IT13 Mini Series PC. The box got a bit dinged up in post, but that's okay. They didn't put any bubble wrap around it, but I'm sure it survived. And then around the box, just got a picture of what it's going to look like in its ice blue colorway. i9, i7, i5, and i3. You can get an i3 config of this. Okay. At the bottom, the specs do check out to be the i9 32 gig and 2TB option, which is all good there. Opening up the box, there it is. There's our little buddy there, which is all plastic, but this has a metal frame inside of it. Otherwise, within the box, we get a thank you card, which looks pretty cool. Oh, it's actually in a... Oh, look at this. Wow, they've been around since 2003. There you go. You get a little thank you card there. Thank you for purchasing. I didn't purchase it, but that's okay. We love, we pursue. That's their slogan too, by the way. That's nice. So inside the box, we get a European plug. Luckily, it's just a standard 3-pin laptop connector, so I can replace that. That's not an issue. HDMI cable, some screws for the mounting bracket, the power adapter just there as well, quick start guide, and there is the mount just there. Looks like a standard Acer or Acer's power supply, to be fairly honest. Oh, it's called a Mozo. 120 watts, 19 volts at 6.32 amps, and it is quite a beefy unit. Then the setup guide. Oh, okay, it's quite big. The steps to install the stuff in this looks pretty self-explanatory actually, and it looks easy to take apart. The Beelink SER6 MAX was a little bit iffy to take apart, so we'll have to see how easy this one is to disassemble. And taking the film off reveals the Mini PC, and there's also a protective film on top. There we go. That's clean looking. But on the front, we've got the 2 USB 3.2 ports, the headphone jack and power button. On the side, we get ventilation as well as a Kensington lock. On the other side, more ventilation as well as an SD card reader, which honestly, this is quite handy to have. It's one thing the Beelink didn't have, so that's a win in my books. Then at the back, we've got the 2 USB 4 ports, 2 HDMI connectors, 2.5 gigabit LAN, USB 2.0, and the third USB 3.2 connected there. And we've got more ventilation at the back for the fan to exhaust air out the back there. Putting these side by side, the Beelink is actually a bit bigger than this. And while we get Type-C on the front of the Beelink, which I'd much prefer, we do get the two USB Type-A ports on front of the GEEKOM one, but at least we've got USB Type-C on the back. But otherwise, to get into both of these is just 4 screws. So let me go ahead and take this apart and see how easy it is for upgradability. So for mini PCs like this, it should be easy to just upgrade the RAM and SSD and stuff like that. With the Beelink, you had to take the 4 screws off and then had to take more screws off to then get into it. You had to be careful of the flex connector for the second M.2 SSD, and that's just a little bit inconvenient. So hopefully this is just nice and easy. And there's a little arrow just there indicating that this goes to the front, which is easy to follow. And once I've taken those 4 screws off like that, we're in. That's easy. There's one single flex cable that holds the SATA connection right there, but that is super easy to take out. That just comes off like so. And then what you can do is simply slot in your SSD like that, and you take these little rubber pieces off to screw the drive down into place, and that's it. Simple. So I do like that upgradability right there. And there we go. There's our 2TB Lexar M.2 at 2280 PCIe Gen 4x4 SSD right there. There is our second M.2 slot right there, and the two DDR4 modules just here are Lexar as well, and they're both 16 gig DDR4 at 3200. Taking the SSD out reveals the Wi-Fi card. I'll keep tearing this down to see how hard it'll be to get to the processor, just in case you want to reapply thermal paste. It shouldn't be too difficult, but I think I might have to take out both RAM sticks. So what you have to do is take the top plate off first, which is just held into place with some clips. Then you get access to 4 more screws. And then once I've taken those 4 screws out, I can simply just pull the top off, and I'm starting to see the fan as well as the metal housing. Now, I don't think you need to take the top off to get into this, but I just thought I will because it makes it easier to get to these ports, to slide them sort of out of there like so. There is our fan there, which is just held in by 3 screws. So I'll take these off, and lifting up the fan, there is the heat pipe and the heatsink that goes onto the i9 right there, and it also extends to probably the VRM and stuff right there. There's also the CMOS battery just there as well. Fairly easy to take apart, actually. That was not that complicated at all. And that heat pipe is actually quite thick as well, and the fan also has several blades on it. We'll have to see how loud that is during testing. All right, well, I'll go ahead and put this back together. Honestly, I really appreciate how easy it is to take this apart. Not gonna lie, I got really frustrated with the Beelink one because all the screws were different sizes, and to upgrade the RAM, you've got to take real special care with the flex ribbon and the fan cable and all that sort of stuff. So I'm liking this a lot more in terms of the upgradability. Easy, simple, snappity snaps. Alright, we're back together. I think it's time that we finally hook this up and start testing this PC out and see what it's capable of doing. Booting the GEEKOM IT13 up into BIOS by pressing delete shows us a very simple BIOS menu with not many options to play around with, apart from boot configuration and etc. I wouldn't have expected to see any overclocking in here anyways. So moving into booting up Windows 11 for the first time and setting it up, which it asked for an email to sign in, but you can bypass this by putting in a certain email and anything for the password, and this skips that little bit, so that's what I did, but otherwise, once setup was done, I arrived at the desktop. Boot times are also quite snappy for this, taking roughly 17 seconds from power button press to the desktop, so that's pretty good there. Checking the specifications in Windows shows the 2TB SSD as our boot drive, and then going into system we see the Core i9-13900H processor with 32 gigs of RAM and Windows 11 Pro, so all is fine here. I'm not a big fan of Windows 11, so I'd probably opt for Windows 10 on this, or even a Linux distro if that's your thing. Also enter Device Manager to have a look through here, confirming all the hardware. So that's no problems there. Opening up CPU-Z to check the processor details a little bit better, I forgot to mention that with the i9-13900H and its 14 cores, 6 of those are performance cores and then 8 of them are efficiency cores, and the turbo frequency of the i9 can reach up to 5.4 GHz, which is quite insane. We also have the 32 gig of DDR4 running at 3600 megatransfers per second or 1600 MHz. It is unfortunate that this is using DDR4 instead of DDR5, as with DDR5 we could have had slightly higher clock speeds with the RAM, but it is what it is. I've also opened up core temp to the side to see what temperatures I get during this point in time, but I'll need to talk about those temperatures very soon. Checking the integrated graphics in GPU-Z doesn't really show too much, even on an updated version, but I'm honestly not expecting too much from the Iris Xe graphics in terms of performance compared to what I've seen with the Beelink SER6 MAX, but we'll see how we go. Running AS SSD benchmark resulted in 3795 megabytes read speed and 3676 megabytes write speed, which is really good speeds for this SSD. Not too sure about this error that did pop up while I was was testing the SSD, but I just ignored it and carried on. Comparing this with the 500GB SSD in the Beelink PC, they got 3786 MB read speed and 1737 MB write speed. It is quite a considerable difference for the write speeds from that, so I'm happy with the performance here. I also decided to run Windows Update to ensure I had the latest version of Windows on this, and made sure that all drivers were up to date before I did any testing. And here is Costa Rica in 4K on YouTube in Google Chrome, and that runs absolutely smoothly, as it should with no buffering. I then tried a 4K video of Jellyfish at 140 megabits per second, and that ran absolutely flawlessly as well. So media playback on this PC is guaranteed to be no problems, and also general usability and browsing is perfect for this considering the specifications. After this point though, this is where we start to see some issues with this PC. Running Cinebench R23 for the first time, you can immediately see some of the performance cores hit 100 degrees Celsius, then dropping down to around the 70 degree mark for the most part. I was concerned seeing this, but granted I'm pushing the PC to 100% usage, but even then I shouldn't be seeing 100 degrees on some of the cores. I did not take the heatsink off this or repaste this. I also made sure the screws were tightened to the motherboard, which they were, and the fan in this PC I've had some issues with also. Sometimes it runs loud without doing absolutely anything, but then while at 100% load, it stays kind of silent. It is definitely working, but I'm just not sure what is with that. I'll demonstrate that later on. Multi-core score for the i9-13900H was 11,302. The Beelink SER6 MAX with the Ryzen 7735HS got 13,425, which is quite a big difference. The price difference between the two units I'll need to bring up many times during this review, but other scores from other processors puts the performance of the i9 on par with an Intel i5 11600K and an AMD Ryzen 5 5600, which isn't too bad at all, but I just want to say that if you were to get the i7 variant of the GEEKOM IT13, you'd likely see the same numbers here, as well as with general performance. Between the i7 and i9, it's only just clock speed that's different and a $100 price difference. I'd say even the i5 would be plenty, and there's honestly no need for the i9 in a mini PC. Yeah, it's a first and everything, but at the same time, a decent i7 in this is more than enough. I also need to say for the advertising for this, GEEKOM did promise 19,318 for the multi-core score and 1,932 for the single core score, which is not quite correct from the tests that I've done. I have emailed GEEKOM to ask about the temperatures and the results displayed on their website, but as of yet, I have not got a response back from them. And the single core score with Cinebench came back as 1,695. The Beelink SER6 MAX got 1,554, and as a comparison, it's a few points less than the Apple M2 and Intel i9 11900K, and these are all just numbers at the end of the day. The higher is better, of course. However, even with the Beelink and its missing screw on the heatsink, which Beelink did respond to that, and they took the issue quite seriously and offered to send me a replacement unit, but I said my one was fine, so that was very kind and professional of them. The Beelink just had better performance overall and held up in thermals quite well, and you'll see a difference during gaming soon. I decided to run Cinebench again, this time with HWMonitor open to the side, so you can see all performance and efficiency cores at their usage and temperatures. Once again, 100 degrees Celsius was hit on some of the performance cores. The second run of Cinebench provided very different scores than beforehand, with 10,599 multi and 1,518 for single, which is a jump from what I got the first time around. I'll use the scores from the first run to take on board for this review, but I'm not too sure what caused the difference. A few numbers off, yeah, but the single core score was a bit strange. Anyways, I decided to run Geekbench as a secondary test and got 2,128 for single and 10,230 for multi. Once again, different numbers as this was a different benchmark, but just double checking other scores, you can see the results come close with an Intel Core i3 12100 for single and an Intel Core i5 13400T for multi. As the last benchmark, I did see on another review for this same mini PC, they had ran Night Raid with 3D Mark, so I did exactly that, and the scores were actually quite a bit less than what was shown on their video, as they got 17,224 for the Night Raid score, whereas I got just over 16,000. At this point though, I've kind of seen enough benchmarking numbers, so I'd much rather move on to gaming to get a better idea of performance. And while I was downloading 3D Mark, you can see the temperatures for just normal usage being completely in the threshold, so with most basic tasks you'll be fine in that department, and even pushing it a bit further, you'll still be seeing fairly decent temperatures. And also, since I use an outdated video editor, I can't show 4K rendering being performed, but I'd imagine doing this, you would likely see 100 degrees Celsius on the cores again. But honestly, this as a video editing PC is probably not a good fit. I see this mini PC as being more of an office PC, more than anything else. And once again, going back to the Beelink, that at least had some decent integrated graphics. So enough of the benchmarks, let's try some gaming to see how we go. I decided to use OBS to capture gameplay, as well as installing MSI Afterburner to show the status of the RAM, CPU, GPU, and etc. And here is where I ran into yet another issue. I used the same version of OBS as I used on the Beelink, Beelink in the exact same settings, and the result looked a little something like this. I was actually playing Cyberpunk fine, but it was just capturing that had issues. Turns out that OBS was complaining about an overload with encoding, so I had to end up lowering the settings for recording videos, which ended up working fine. So using OBS on lower settings and with Cyberpunk 2077 set to 720p and all low settings, I was seeing an average of about 25 FPS, which isn't the best compared to what I've seen on the Beelink. Yes, we could argue that a mini PC shouldn't really be a gaming PC, but it's advertised as being one on GEEKOM's official website, but with Cyberpunk, it's barely holding on at 720p on low. I decided to put the settings up to medium to see how I went, and honestly, I got around the same performance with around 25 FPS average. It looked nice this time around at least. As a test, I thought maybe OBS is causing some performance issues, so instead I switched to the screen recorder built into Windows with the whole Xbox game bar stuff, and at medium I did see a bit higher FPS, averaging about 32 FPS, which, I mean, it's playable, but spending $789 on this when there is plenty of other mini PCs on the market, not just from Beelink, that offer Ryzen processors that can easily play this at high settings, is just, yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. Intel graphics are just not up to par with what is offered from AMD. Continuing to record gameplay with the Windows screen recorder, here is GTA 5 at 720p with mostly medium settings, and it ran a little something like this, seeing an average of about 35 FPS. I did see some higher spikes at certain points, but I've seen GTA 5 running better on even lower spec machines, so it just shows the integrated Intel graphics are just lacking. With media playback it's fine, but trying to game is going to result in some pretty poor results unless you play older games or emulators in which you'd likely have better performance, but once again, coming back to the price of the i9 config, it's just not really worth it. Up next with Doom Eternal at 720p and low settings actually performed pretty well, hitting more than 40 FPS at most times, which is better than expected, and with all the carnage happening on screen I just thought it would struggle, but this was playable, I'll give it that. But from what I've seen on the Beelink, and considering I played the games at 1080p, I know what I'd prefer at the end of the day. Just given the price difference, but having less storage, I just see the Beelink as a winner here. I can't compare this to any other mini PC since I don't have any other ones to review, so this is why I'm only comparing it with the Beelink, as that was my recent experience. And I'm trying to do this review as a bit of a consumer, but knowing that the Beelink is cheaper and offers better performance, it's just an easier decision to make with what I would personally go with. But I think it's time that we jump back to the desk, and I'll continue with a conclusion as well as a few other things. And we're back. That is everything that I needed to test on the GEEKOM IT13. I've honestly tried to think of anything else to show on this PC, and apart from 4K rendering, which, as I mentioned earlier, I'm using an outdated video editor, so the results just won't be that accurate, I'll just rely on the benchmarks and gaming performance to go off in the conclusion. Before I jump into the very long conclusion about this mini PC, I'll splice in how the fan sounds at idle and at 100% usage to show you the inconsistencies with that. And this is the fan noise of the GEEKOM IT13, just at idle. And this is the fan noise of the GEEKOM IT13 at 100% usage. As you can see, I'm not doing anything on the PC at the moment. It's just idling, and this is the fan noise. See how it's ramping up now? I go back to there. 0% usage. Very confusing. The temperatures are completely fine at 28 degrees on most cores, but it's still, yeah, I'm not too sure. Alright, as a test, so listen to it now. I'm going to run Cinebench in 3, 2, 1, now. Running Cinebench. Quietens. Cinebench is running. And now it's gone quiet. It baffles me. And as you've just seen and heard, it's very strange. While it's at idle, it's louder than it is at 100% usage. Not sure what's really going on with this. I mean, the fan works, don't get me wrong. It's just I've never heard of a fan operating in reverse. Being louder, idling, but quieter on load. But while we're on sort of the topic of thermals and stuff, here's a bit of a twist. I decided to try something before I wrote my final conclusion down, and it's kind of made a huge difference about the thermals. What happened was I decided to pull this apart to take a look at the factory applied thermal paste, and this is what I found. So I've just taken the GEEKOM Mini PC apart to repaste it just to see if that helps with the thermals. And this is the factory applied thermal paste right here, which isn't too much there. It honestly feels like there's not enough thermal paste there. So I'll put some more thermal paste in myself, put this back together, and see if I get better thermals. So with what I found on the heatsink, that thermal paste was absolutely rock solid. I had to really scrub away at it with isopropyl alcohol to get it off, because it just wasn't soft, it was just a very hard pre-applied thermal paste. So what I ended up doing is reapplying some Noctua thermal paste and ran Cinebench again. This time getting a maximum of 80 degrees on one of the cores, which is an absolutely huge difference from the factory applied thermal paste. So if you do end up getting this i9 PC, the first thing you'll want to do is reapply the thermal paste, which really is a huge inconvenience. Going back to the Beelink PC, yes, there was a screw missing from the heatsink, which is a major flaw, but that was a one-off. With GEEKOM mass producing these, and likely putting the same thermal paste on every single PC, this is definitely not a one-off. This is going to be a mass-produced problem with this unit. For me, this is a bit of a letdown. As I said, I'll compare this with the Beelink I recently reviewed. And I know there are plenty of other mini PCs out there that have better configs at different prices, it just depends who you want to go with. So for the asking price of the i9 variant with 32GB of DDR4 and a 2TB SSD for $789 US, or roughly 1,230 Australian dollars, I can't say this is really worth it. I did show the mini PCs that are available at Centacom earlier, but unfortunately most of them are out of stock now. However, Centacom actually does have a version of the Asus PN51 in stock with a Ryzen 7 64GB of RAM and a 4TB SSD for 1,199 Australian dollars, so that there would be perfect and would beat the GEEKOM in terms of performance. The i9 IT13 is really simply a big thing for marketing. It's the first mini PC with an i9, which is all well and good, but it comes at a higher cost, but no real big performance jump. I'd say a better config with the GEEKOM IT13 is the i5 or the i7 variant for a few reasons. They're cheaper for one, and they'll also basically run exactly the same as what you've seen here. Fair enough, the i5 will be a bit less, but the i7 will be pretty much almost the same performance that you've seen with the i9. Also DDR4 instead of DDR5, but it just would have been higher clock on the RAM, so not much of a big deal. I also can understand a small discount with a coupon code offered by GEEKOM, but I wouldn't use it on the i9 config. There's just no real reason to get an i9 in a small form factor. If you want a mini PC for office work, you surely won't want to get an i9. So then we get into the argument, I want an i9 for gaming, but you can't play major titles at a stable 60 FPS even on 720p. Then we go to, okay, then for media playback, you don't need an i9 for that. To be honest, an i3 or an i5 would be plenty enough as a media PC. The Beelink could be considered overkill for a mini PC, and the price for that at $589 US might still be expensive, but the performance in the size is overall much better than the GEEKOM. The IT13 with an i5 is $499 US with lesser cores, which is what I'd personally recommend if you are absolutely solid on a GEEKOM 13th gen PC. Going back to the thermals, which I've now fixed by reapplying thermal paste, seeing 100 degrees Celsius on some of those cores was just very concerning. Granted, that was at 100% usage, so for most folks you'd likely never get to that point. However, if you were getting an i9, you'd likely be wanting to run heavy tasks anyways, so if you stuck with normal usage, you'd be fine temperature-wise. I'm just glad it wasn't the cooling in this being a major issue, as the heatsink is perfectly fine. The fan is a little bit inconsistent. It was just whatever thermal paste was applied just wasn't agreeing with the system. Also, the issue with OBS saying an encoding overload while recording may have just been an error on my part, but as I said, I used the exact same settings that I used on the Beelink and still encountered issues on the GEEKOM. The benchmarks advertised from GEEKOM and from what I got in my testing is also a concern. I've ran them again with new thermal paste, and I'm still getting the same scores. I've still not heard back from GEEKOM, so I can't say anything else until they let me know what's really going on. The build of the IT13 being plastic on the outside with a metal frame is okay, but the Beelink was all aluminium and felt a lot sturdier overall. No Type-C on the front, but that's also not a big deal. You do have a healthy amount of ports on the back and front, but one port that didn't make an appearance is a native display port. You can outport through USB Type-C if you want to, but it just would have been handy to have a display port. I also do appreciate the extra M.2 slot and space for a 2.5-inch SSD or hard drive. That's some decent upgrade options there for later down the track, and I also do like the easy access to the internals also. I said with the Beelink review that I'm not too up to date with newer hardware, so experiencing all this is new for me, but it's given me an idea as a consumer. By putting the two mini PCs side by side, I really just see a clear winner for the price. And I know I haven't tested absolutely everything on this PC, but I've tried to do as much as I could on this, and this is just my honest opinion with it. The i9 sounds good on paper, but the execution just lacks, in my opinion, especially for the price. You don't need an i9 mini PC. If you paired a GPU with this in an external enclosure, then alright, but you may as well just opt for a small form factor PC with desktop parts and proper cooling if you decide to go down the path of adding an external GPU to this. If you want to check out the GEEKOM IT13, there's links in the description to purchase one if you want to. They're not affiliate links or anything like that. I won't earn anything if you click them. They're just there for your convenience. If you want to jump straight onto Google and check them out somewhere else, you absolutely can. One of the links is for Amazon as well. And you can use the coupon codes that GEEKOM has provided me, which you can use SMOOREZ on GEEKOM's website to get $40 off, or SMOOREZ1 on Amazon to get $40 off as well. So taking that into consideration, the i5 would be $459, which that's not too bad, but it's up to you at the end of the day. And I was not paid by GEEKOM for this review. There were some hints during the email exchanges that the marketing was a big part of this, but I tried to not let that influence me and go into this with an open mind. And I will say I won't ever accept paid reviews. I only accept a sample being sent out to me to express my honest opinions on, and that's what I've done today. A massive thank you to GEEKOM for sending this PC out to me for a review. You know, I really do appreciate it. And I know I tore this PC apart, but there's no way I could have said, yeah, this is worth it. I am sorry for sounding really harsh in this one, but this is what happens with reviews. It's just my opinion on this product at the end of the day, so I hope GEEKOM takes all of this on board. And once again, it comes back to, it's hard to criticize a product I get sent for free. But at least in this one, I was able to kind of switch my mind into a consumer aspect, looking at this and going, would I really be happy with this at its current asking price? And it looks like you've made it to the end of this video. Thanks so much for watching this one, and I hope I've given you all an in-depth review of another mini PC. I've still rambled my way through this review, but I needed to have a script done just to make this review a little bit more constructive and professional, because I didn't want this to be a complete rambling mess. I wanted it to at least have some bit of structure, and I think I've achieved that. I've tried my hardest in this review to get it right and everything. I know it's not perfect, but if you've had to use the timestamps to skip past certain bits of this video, that's completely understandable, because yeah, as I said, this video is kind of just all over the place, but I've tried to structure it. Honestly, I have tried. That's it, everyone. That is taking a look at the GEEKOM IT13 Mini PC, which I definitely know that I've said a lot of times during this review, but I hope you've all enjoyed this one regardless. This will probably be one of the last like mini PC reviews that I'll do for quite a long time. I just really wanted to try an AMD one and an Intel one, and so far I can see that AMD is the clear winner for me. Feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, what you think of this, if you feel that the i9 is overkill, and all that sort of stuff. I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Otherwise, I'm nearing my break in 2 more weeks, so I'll try and get some more content out as soon as possible. I've got some ideas for some stuff, so stay tuned for that. But I thank everyone for watching these videos. I really do appreciate it, and we're creeping up to 93,000. I feel it was the other day that I was saying 92,000, and 93 is just literally around the corner. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this channel and watching me look at all these random devices and all that sort of stuff. I hope you're getting entertainment out of this, and I hope you are enjoying whatever content that I'm producing. As always, everyone, please take care, stay safe, be good people, and I'll see you all in the next video, which should be the Android calculator. I've received the second one. I'll start testing it, and hopefully you'll be seeing that next. But until then, keep being awesome, and I'll see you all next time. If you like this content, feel free to leave a like or a dislike if you didn't. Thanks heaps for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.